March 2015. The desert wind carried an unusual chill through the suburban streets of Phoenix as morning joggers began their routines along the familiar sidewalks of Maryvale. 3 unmarked police vehicles pulled up to 4127 West Thomas Road at exactly 6:47 a.m., their engines cutting through the pre-dawn silence like harbingers of long-buried secrets. Retired third-grade teacher Carol Whitman was watering her prized rose garden when Detective Maria Santos approached her white picket fence, badge gleaming in the early sunlight. What began as another peaceful morning in this quiet neighborhood transformed into the shocking conclusion of a 53-year-old murder case that had haunted Phoenix's law enforcement community for over 5 decades. If you're fascinated by cold cases with shocking twists, hit that like button and subscribe for details. Mainstream coverage leaves out born Margaret Elizabeth Hartley on September 12, 1924, in rural Indiana. The woman who would become known as Carol Whitman stood 5 feet 4 inches tall with striking auburn hair and emerald green eyes that colleagues described as radiating warmth and intelligence. Her parents, Thomas Hartley, a Methodist minister, and Dorothy May Hartley, a seamstress, raised Margaret alongside her younger brother James in a modest 2-bedroom farmhouse where education and community service were considered sacred duties. Margaret always had this incredible ability to make everyone feel special, recalled her childhood friend Susan Mitchell, now 89. She'd spent her lunch money buying books for kids who couldn't afford them. Her sister-in-law, Patricia Hartley, remembered how Margaret dreamed of moving west to teach children whose families had migrated during the Dust Bowl era, believing education was the key to breaking cycles of poverty. By 1961, Margaret had earned her teaching degree from Indiana State University and relocated to Phoenix, where she legally changed her name to Carol Whitman, seeking a fresh start in the rapidly expanding desert city. Her daily routine included morning prayers at 5:30 a.m., followed by lesson planning over coffee, and evening tutoring sessions for struggling students in her modest apartment on Central Avenue. Phoenix, in 1962, was a city caught between its frontier past and modern aspirations, with a population approaching 440,000 residents drawn by aerospace jobs and year-round sunshine. The post-war economic boom had transformed sleepy desert communities into sprawling suburbs, where families like the Kennedys, Johnsons, and Petersons built ranch-style homes with swimming pools and 2-car garages. Racially segregated neighborhoods still defined much of the city's social structure, while the growing influence of conservative politics mixed with an influx of liberal professionals from California and the Northeast. Downtown Phoenix bustled with department stores like Goldwater's and Diamond's, where middle-class families shopped on Saturday afternoons before catching movies at the ornate Orpheum Theater. The city's rapid expansion meant many neighborhoods lacked adequate street lighting and police patrols, creating isolated pockets where crimes could occur without immediate detection. Local newspapers focused primarily on Cold War anxieties and Barry Goldwater's rising political star, while community organizations like the PTA and Rotary Club provided social cohesion for newcomers seeking to establish roots in the desert landscape. October 13, 1962, began as an ordinary Saturday for Carol Whitman, who had planned to spend her weekend grading papers and visiting the Phoenix Art Museum. At 15 a.m., Carol ate breakfast at Murphy's Diner on Central Avenue, where waitress Helen Rodriguez later recalled her ordering scrambled eggs and wheat toast while reading a novel by Harper Lee. 10:30 a.m., she purchased art supplies at Jensen's craft store, telling clerk Robert Chen she planned to create Halloween decorations for her classroom. 12:45 p.m. Carol had lunch with fellow teacher Linda Morrison at the Westwood Ho Hotel restaurant, discussing plans for a joint field trip to the Heard Museum. 2:20 p.m. Apartment building manager Frank D'Angelo saw Carol returning home with grocery bags and art supplies. 4:15 p.m. Neighbor Mrs. Eleanor Patterson heard Carol's record player beginning Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, a weekend ritual everyone in the building had grown accustomed to hearing. 6:30 p.m. Carol called her brother James in Indiana, their weekly conversation lasting exactly 27 minutes, according to phone company records. She sounded happy and excited about her student's progress, James later testified. 8:10 p.m. Carol was seen walking toward the corner market to buy milk for Sunday morning. her last confirmed public appearance. 9:45 p.m. Residents reported hearing what sounded like furniture being moved upstairs, followed by unusual silence from Carol's normally active apartment. The last entry in her diary, discovered weeks later, read simply, "Tomorrow, I'll introduce the children to Edgar Allan Poe." How wonderful to watch young minds discover the power of words. Carol's absence wasn't discovered until Monday morning, when she failed to appear for her 7:30 a.m. faculty meeting at Desert View Elementary School. Principal Robert Hawkins initially assumed she had fallen ill, but when repeated phone calls went unanswered, he asked Building Superintendent Joe Martinez to check her apartment at 1247 North Central Avenue. Martinez discovered Carol's front door slightly ajar, revealing a scene that would haunt Phoenix investigators for decades. Her modest living room showed clear signs of a violent struggle. Overturned furniture, scattered lesson plans, and a broken picture frame containing a photograph of her students. Carol's body was found in the bedroom, positioned in a way that suggested the killer had attempted to stage the scene as a burglary gone wrong. Crime scene investigators collected 7 crucial pieces of evidence: a torn piece of blue fabric caught on the window latch, muddy footprints leading from the back door, a cigarette butt that didn't match Carol's preferred brand, partial fingerprints on the bedroom dresser, a bloody handprint on the bathroom door frame, strand of coarse black hair found under Carol's fingernails, and a distinctive button made from abalone shell discovered beneath the bed. "I've worked hundreds of crime scenes, but this one felt different," recalled retired Detective William Crawford. "Everything seemed carefully planned, except for these small details the killer left behind." The Phoenix Police Department's initial response was swift, but hampered by limited forensic technology available in 1962. Within hours, news of Carol's murder spread throughout the tight-knit teaching community, creating waves of fear and disbelief that a beloved educator could become the victim of such senseless violence. Are you watching this from somewhere that feels safe? Let us know in the comments how cases like this make you think about your own community's security. The Phoenix Police Department's 1962 investigation team, led by Detective Lieutenant Harold Morrison, faced immediate pressure to solve a case that had shocked the city's educational establishment and concerned parent community. The department's limited resources included basic fingerprinting capabilities, rudimentary photography equipment, and investigative techniques that relied heavily on witness interviews and circumstantial evidence. 5 primary suspects emerged during the initial investigation, each presenting compelling motives and troubling connections to Carol's personal life. Richard Allen Kowalski, 34, apartment maintenance worker, had master keys to all units and had been seen near Carol's building multiple times during the previous week. Investigators discovered that Kowalski had made several unwelcome advances toward Carol, who had complained to building management about his inappropriate behavior. His alibi claimed he was drinking at Murphy's Tavern until closing time, but bartender testimony proved inconsistent and unreliable. However, Kowalski was ultimately excluded when his fingerprints failed to match those found at the crime scene, and 3 separate witnesses confirmed seeing him at a downtown poker game during the estimated time of death. David Emmanuel Santos, 28, fellow teacher, and Carol's occasional dinner companion, had recently been rejected when he proposed marriage during a faculty social gathering. Santos possessed intimate knowledge of Carol's weekend routines and had a key to her apartment, given during a previous occasion when he watered her plants during spring break. His alibi claimed he was visiting his elderly mother in Tucson, but gas station receipts and motel records were never thoroughly verified due to investigative oversight. Santos was eliminated as a suspect when multiple witnesses confirmed his presence at a family birthday party in Tucson, supported by photographs and independent testimony from relatives who barely knew Carol. Thomas Mitchell Patterson, 41, divorced neighbor who lived in the apartment directly below Carol's, had frequently complained about noise from her Sunday evening music sessions and weekend tutoring activities. Patterson worked as a traveling insurance salesman and had detailed knowledge of residents' schedules and habits, making him particularly suspicious to investigators who noted his evasive answers during initial questioning. His alibi claimed he was visiting potential clients in Flagstaff, supported by business appointment records, and hotel receipts that seemed legitimate, but were never independently verified. Patterson was excluded when medical records revealed he was hospitalized for appendicitis surgery in Flagstaff during the weekend of Carol's murder, with hospital staff confirming his presence throughout the relevant time period. Frank Joseph Morrison, Jr., 25, distant relative of Carol's teaching colleague Linda Morrison, had been introduced to Carol at several school social functions and had reportedly expressed romantic interest that was not reciprocated. Morrison worked various odd jobs around Phoenix and had been seen near Carol's neighborhood on multiple occasions, though he claimed these visits were related to potential employment opportunities with local businesses. His alibi placed him at home with his elderly aunt, but the aunt's advanced age and memory problems made her testimony unreliable for eliminating him as a suspect. Morrison was ultimately excluded when polygraph tests, though not admissible in court, suggested truthfulness, and physical evidence failed to link him to the crime scene. Carl Benjamin Hughes, 39, local businessman who owned several rental properties, including Carol's apartment building, had access to all units and detailed knowledge of residents' personal information and daily routines. Hughes had been experiencing financial difficulties and had recently increased rents, causing tension with several tenants, including Carol, who had written letters complaining about building maintenance and security issues. His alibi claimed he was attending a real estate conference in Los Angeles, but travel records were incomplete, and witness verification proved challenging for overworked investigators. Hughes was eventually eliminated when bank records confirmed legitimate business transactions in Los Angeles during the murder timeframe, and multiple hotel staff members independently verified his presence at the conference throughout the weekend. By December 1962, leads had dried up and investigative resources were redirected toward more recent cases demanding immediate attention. The lack of advanced forensic technology meant that crucial evidence collected at Carol's apartment remained largely unanalyzable, sitting in storage boxes, while detectives pursued increasingly unlikely theories and false leads that wasted precious investigative time. The case was officially designated as inactive pending new evidence on January 15, 1963, though Detective Morrison continued reviewing the file during his spare time until his retirement in 1978. The final investigative report cited insufficient physical evidence and lack of credible witnesses as primary obstacles to achieving resolution, though many officers privately believed the killer had simply been more careful and intelligent than typical criminals they encountered during that era. What time is it where you're watching? Think about how many years have passed since Carol's students would have graduated and started families of their own. Carol's death devastated her small but devoted family, particularly her brother James Hartley, who had encouraged her Western adventure, and felt responsible for her decision to move so far from Indiana's familiar support systems. James Robert Hartley, 32 at the time of his sister's murder, abandoned his career as a high school mathematics teacher and spent the next 15 years working as a private investigator, using his savings and vacation time to travel to Phoenix repeatedly, conducting his own investigation into Carol's death. "I promised our parents I'd watch over Margaret, and I failed her when she needed protection most," James wrote in letters to Phoenix police chiefs throughout the 1960s and 1970s. He developed detailed charts and timelines, interviewed witnesses independently, and maintained correspondence with retired detectives long after official interest had waned. James never married, dedicating his life to seeking justice for his sister while battling depression and alcohol problems that ultimately led to his death from liver disease in 1987. Their elderly parents, Thomas and Dorothy Hartley, aged rapidly after receiving news of their daughter's murder, with Thomas suffering a heart attack 3 months later that family members attributed to grief and stress. Dorothy May Hartley became obsessed with preserving Carol's memory, converting their daughter's childhood bedroom into a shrine filled with teaching materials, student letters, and newspaper clippings about the case that she read daily until her death in 1979. "She never stopped believing someone would call with news about Margaret's killer," recalled family friend Patricia Collins. Carol's sister-in-law, Patricia Hartley, James's wife of 2 years, struggled to support her husband's obsession while managing their own financial struggles, and her growing concern about his mental health deterioration. The extended family eventually fractured under the weight of unresolved grief, with cousins and distant relatives gradually distancing themselves from what they perceived as James's unhealthy fixation on a case that would never be solved. Carol's teaching colleagues established the Margaret Elizabeth Hartley Memorial Scholarship in 1963, providing educational assistance to children from low-income families, though interest and donations declined significantly as years passed, and memories of the beloved teacher faded from community consciousness. The Phoenix Police Department revisited Carol Whitman's case during 5 separate cold case reviews between 1975 and 2010, each utilizing the most advanced investigative technologies available during their respective time periods. In 1981, Detective Sergeant Rosa Martinez reopened the investigation using improved fingerprint analysis techniques, but discovered that evidence degradation and poor storage conditions had compromised much of the original physical evidence collected at the crime scene. The 1987 review, conducted by Detective Captain William Thompson, focused on re-interviewing surviving witnesses and family members, but 25 years had passed and memories had faded significantly, with several key witnesses having died or developed medical conditions affecting their recollections. During 1994, the department attempted to use early DNA analysis technology on the hair sample found under Carol's fingernails, but the sample size proved insufficient for conclusive results using techniques available at that time. The 1999 review, led by Detective Lieutenant Sandra Foster, utilized computerized database searches to cross-reference similar unsolved cases from the Southwest region, identifying 3 potentially related murders in Tucson, Albuquerque, and Las Vegas, though no definitive connections were established. In 2003, Detective Sergeant Michael Rodriguez attempted advanced fingerprint enhancement techniques on evidence that had been previously deemed unusable, but technological limitations still prevented successful identification. The 2010 review represented the most comprehensive investigation since the original case, with Detective Captain Jennifer Walsh authorizing complete DNA retesting using modern techniques that required minimal sample sizes for analysis. Phoenix's Maryvale neighborhood transformed dramatically between 1962 and 2015, evolving from a predominantly middle-class Anglo community into a diverse working-class area where Spanish was heard as frequently as English on residential streets. Carol's former apartment building was demolished in 1987 to make way for a shopping center, while Desert View Elementary School was rebuilt twice and renamed to reflect the community's changing demographics and educational priorities. The case influenced Phoenix Police Department policies regarding evidence storage and cold case review procedures, though these changes occurred gradually over several decades rather than immediately following Carol's murder. What's the weather like where you are? Every season that's passed has been another season of waiting for Carol's family. The breakthrough in Carol Whitman's case occurred on February 18, 2015, when Phoenix Police Department forensic specialist Dr. Amanda Chen successfully extracted sufficient DNA material from the previously unusable hair sample, using advanced mitochondrial DNA analysis techniques that had become available only within the previous 3 years. The sample, preserved in a temperature-controlled evidence facility that had been upgraded in 2008, yielded enough genetic material for comparison with the combined DNA index system database that contained millions of profiles from convicted offenders across the United States. Detective Captain Jennifer Walsh authorized the analysis after reviewing the case file and determining that technological advances finally made resolution possible after 5 decades of investigative frustration. Mitochondrial DNA analysis differs significantly from traditional nuclear DNA testing because it examines genetic material found in cellular mitochondria rather than the cell nucleus, allowing scientists to develop profiles from degraded samples that would be useless for conventional analysis. Think of mitochondrial DNA as a backup generator, explained forensic geneticist Dr. Robert Chen. When the main power source is damaged or degraded, we can still get enough energy to power our investigation. The process requires specialized equipment costing hundreds of thousands of dollars and analysis techniques that weren't developed until the late 1990s, explaining why Carol's evidence remained unanalyzed for so many years. The accuracy rate for mitochondrial DNA analysis exceeds 99.7% when sufficient material is available, making it reliable enough for criminal prosecution in most jurisdictions. The DNA profile generated from Carol's evidence matched a sample in the federal database belonging to Eleanor Patricia Morrison, 73, a retired third-grade teacher living quietly in Phoenix's Ahwatukee foothills community, just 12 miles from where Carol had been murdered 53 years earlier. Morrison had submitted DNA during a 2009 background check required for volunteer work with a local literacy program, never suspecting that genetic material would eventually link her to a long-forgotten crime. During the original 1962 investigation, Eleanor Morrison had been known as Eleanor Patricia Johnson, a 21-year-old recent college graduate who was never considered a suspect because investigators focused primarily on male perpetrators and failed to recognize that women could commit such violent crimes. Morrison had actually applied for the same teaching position at Desert View Elementary School that was ultimately awarded to Carol, creating professional resentment that festered into obsessive hatred over several months of unemployment and financial hardship. If you're finding this case fascinating, smash that like button, because the revelations about Eleanor's double life will absolutely shock you. Following Carol's murder, Eleanor Morrison created an elaborate facade of respectability that lasted over 5 decades, becoming one of Phoenix's most celebrated educators while secretly harboring the dark knowledge of her violent crime. Throughout the 1960s, she taught second grade at various Phoenix elementary schools, earning recognition for innovative teaching methods and dedication to student welfare that earned her multiple Teacher of the Year awards. During the 1970s, Morrison served on the Phoenix School Board and advocated for increased funding for elementary education programs, ironically using her platform to honor teachers like Carol, who had made the ultimate sacrifice for their students. She married fellow educator Robert Morrison in 1968, successfully concealing her past while raising 2 children who grew up believing their mother was a pillar of community virtue and educational excellence. Morrison's most disturbing behavior involved her periodic contact with Carol's family, sending sympathy cards on anniversaries of the murder and even attending memorial services where she expressed grief and outrage about the unsolved case. In 1975, she visited James Hartley during one of his investigative trips to Phoenix, offering to help distribute flyers and providing information about the local teaching community that she claimed might be useful for his independent investigation. Dr. Sarah Martinez, forensic psychologist specializing in criminal behavior, analyzed Morrison's decades-long deception and concluded that Eleanor displayed classic psychopathic traits, including superficial charm, pathological lying, and complete lack of empathy for her victim's family, while simultaneously craving attention and recognition from the very community she had harmed. Morrison participated in at least 6 memorial events honoring Carol between 1963 and 1995, including a dedication ceremony for the Margaret Elizabeth Hartley Memorial Scholarship, where she spoke movingly about the importance of protecting teachers from violence. During the 1980s, she served as president of the Phoenix Education Association and lobbied successfully for improved security measures in schools, cynically using her victim's death to advance her own professional reputation. Morrison's psychological profile suggests she experienced sexual satisfaction from her secret knowledge and ability to manipulate Carol's grieving family members, particularly James Hartley, whom she viewed as intellectually inferior despite his persistent investigative efforts. On March 15, 2015, at exactly 6:47 a.m., Phoenix police detectives arrested Eleanor Morrison at her home without incident, reading charges for first-degree murder, while she stood in her rose garden wearing a pink bathrobe and gardening gloves. Morrison's first words to Detective Captain Walsh were reportedly, "I wondered when this day would finally come," suggesting she had lived with constant anxiety about eventual discovery, despite her outward confidence and community involvement. The search of Morrison's residence revealed a disturbing collection of newspaper clippings about Carol's case, including articles that had never been published in major newspapers, suggesting she had maintained contact with police sources throughout the decades. Investigators also discovered Carol's missing wristwatch and a silver pendant that had belonged to the victim, items that Morrison had apparently kept as trophies of her crime for over 50 years. Phoenix residents struggled to accept that a respected educator who had taught hundreds of local children could be capable of such deception and violence. Morrison's former colleague, retired Principal Sandra Williams, expressed typical community sentiment. Eleanor was the last person anyone would suspect of hurting another teacher. She organized fundraisers, mentored new faculty, and always spoke so passionately about protecting children and fellow educators. Neighbor Robert Chen, who had lived next to Morrison for 15 years, described his shock. She brought us cookies every Christmas and always asked about our grandchildren's school progress. How do you reconcile that kindness with what she apparently did in 1962? Morrison's former students, now middle-aged adults with children of their own, expressed particular betrayal and confusion about learning their beloved teacher had been living a lie throughout their childhood education. The revelation created deep divisions within Phoenix's education community, with some defending Morrison's decades of positive contributions, while others demanded removal of her name from school recognition programs and scholarship funds. What theories do you have about how someone maintained such a deception for 50 years? Share your thoughts in the comments. Morrison's trial began on September 8, 2015, with prosecutor Rebecca Martinez presenting DNA evidence alongside circumstantial evidence that had been insufficient for conviction in 1962, but proved compelling when combined with modern scientific analysis. Key testimony came from handwriting experts who matched Morrison's 1962 job application with anonymous letters sent to police during the original investigation, apparently attempting to misdirect suspicion toward innocent individuals. Morrison's defense attorney, David Goldman, argued that DNA evidence alone was insufficient for conviction, given the passage of time and potential for cross-contamination. But forensic experts testified about proper evidence handling and chain of custody procedures that had protected the sample's integrity. The most dramatic moment occurred when Morrison unexpectedly addressed the court during sentencing, stating, "I have lived with this secret for 53 years, and I want Carol's family to know that not a day passed when I didn't think about what I had done." Judge Patricia Rodriguez sentenced Morrison to life in prison without possibility of parole, noting that the defendant's ability to deceive an entire community while secretly harboring such a dark crime represents a level of psychological manipulation that demands the harshest possible punishment. Carol Whitman's murder ultimately led to significant improvements in cold case investigation procedures and evidence preservation protocols that have helped solve hundreds of similar cases across the United States. The Phoenix Police Department established the Margaret Elizabeth Hartley Cold Case Unit in 2016, specifically dedicated to reviewing unsolved murders using advanced forensic techniques that become available each year. Morrison's case has been studied extensively by criminal psychology programs and law enforcement training academies as an example of how seemingly respectable community members can successfully maintain elaborate deceptions for decades while harboring violent criminal histories. The case also influenced legislation requiring expanded DNA collection from individuals in positions of trust working with children, helping prevent similar situations where dangerous individuals might exploit their respected positions to avoid suspicion. Carol's legacy lives on through the hundreds of students she inspired during her brief teaching career, and the investigative improvements that her case helped generate, ensuring that future victims of similar crimes will have better chances for justice even when decades pass before resolution becomes possible. If this case has opened your eyes to how cold cases can finally be solved, please subscribe to our channel. For more deep dives into investigations the mainstream media doesn't fully explore. We cover cases from across the country where science and persistence finally deliver justice after decades of waiting. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and share this video with anyone interested in true crime stories that show how patience and advancing technology can solve even the most challenging cases. What other cold cases from the 1960s do you think might benefit from modern DNA analysis? Leave your suggestions in the comments below, and let us know if you've ever lived in a community where a respected member turned out to be hiding dark secrets from their past.